Good afternoon. Let's talk about Sahi al Bukhari today and its authenticity. Sahi al Bukhari is considered to be the most prominent and highly revered hadith collections of all times. Imam Bukhari is revered throughout the Muslim world, especially he is considered in high esteem by the Sunni Muslims. I'm going to challenge the authenticity of this so called great collection of hadiths because I think this hadith collection is rather insulting to the prestige, dignity, and honor of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. I'm going to address the issue from a particular point of view whether we do actually have the Sahih al Bukhari, which Imam Bukhari had penned in 842. Imam Bukhari was born in 810 and Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, died in 632. So he was born 178 years after the death of the Prophet. And he allegedly collected hundreds and thousands of hadiths, which numbered well over 600,000. And of those, he collated and collected and put in his book, Sahih al-Bukhari, round about 7,000 hadiths. Of those, many are repeated. So, this hadith collection is considered to be the most authentic Islamic work of all times after the Quran. It is given dignity next to Quran only. Did he really write this Sahih al-Bukhari? He sat down to write and put all his Sahih or most authentic hadiths in the book in 842. Although many claim that he had started his collection works when he was a teenager. So he took over 16 years to collect all these hadiths, but actually he sat down to write the most authentic ones together in 842 when he was inspired by his teacher, Ishaq ibn Ruwaya, and he completed it in 845 at the age of 35. And he allegedly went on writing many more Islamic works. But I have done some research and I'm going to challenge this, whether actually he had written the Sahih al-Bukhari that we have today. Because I think the character that Sahih al-Bukhari portrays, along with his other students, for example, Muslim, Tirmidhi, Nasai, Abu Dawud, Ibn Majah, gives a totally different persona of the Prophet, which we get from the Quran. Sahih al-Bukhari, as I said, was completed in 845 with further revisions later in his life, but he died in 870. We do not have any of his authentic works. We do not have any of his own handwritten manuscripts. Let's begin with that. We do not have any of his authentic writings or manuscripts. Let's settle that. I have made some notes, so I'm going to read the notes for your understanding, and it will also make it easy for me to explain things. So, he had delivered his lectures to thousands of his students. And there was a time when he even had well over 1,000 people who had already heard his hadith collection from him. So the main purpose of his work was to decipher authentic sayings of the Prophet, deeds of the Prophet, from many of the known false fabrications of that time. So his students should have had given extreme care to it, to preserve it. But still we don't have it. We do not have a single copy from any of his students who had heard it from him and had penned it down. Not a single copy of Sahih al-Bukhari, even from his students. But allegedly, he had conveyed Sahih al-Bukhari verbally to one gentleman called Al-Firabri or Firabra. That's the best pronunciation I could come up with. Now, this Firabri gentleman, he met Bukhari in 866. So Bukhari died in 870, and this Firabri guy, he met Bukhari in 866. We don't have a copy of Firabri. We don't have any copy of this Firabri guy, who died in 932. He died in 932. Al-Firabri. We do not have much information about his biography. We hear about many words. We hear so many laurels and words of wisdom. How great Imam Bukhari was, how great his memory was. But we do not have any confirmed, documented evidence regarding Al-Firabri. There are efforts by many Muslim scholars, apologetic Muslim scholars, who would say there were some scholars of his time who praised him, but those are in nowhere to be matched with the so-called great prominence of Imam Bukhari and his power of memorizing things. We do not have any evidence to confirm how great Al-Firabri's memorizing capabilities were. We do not have any great work from Al-Firabri, any great written academia of his background and everything. We do not have any well-documented book written or a scholarly work written by Al-Firabri to put him in a very high esteem. Now, this Firabri gentleman, he passed on his knowledge or his information or what he had learned from Imam Bukhari in 866 to his student, another gentleman named Muhammad bin Ahmed al-Marwazi in 930. So you do the calculation. He heard from Bukhari in 866 and conveyed to his student 64 years after that, verbally. In 64 years after he had met Bukhari. 64 years after. So even if, for argument's sake, you take that he was a 16-year-old boy when he had met Imam Bukhari. So he was 80 years old in 930 when he had conveyed Imam Bukhari's work, Sahi Bukhari, to his student, Muhammad bin Ahmed al-Marwazi, in 930, when Marwazi was 17 years old. Marwazi was 17 years old. We don't have much information about this Muhammad bin Ahmed al-Marwazi. We don't have any confirmed evidences. Doesn't matter how much many Islamic apologetic scholars claim about Marwazi. We don't know much about him. He was the guy who wrote down Sahih al-Bukhari from what he had learned from Firabri, who was he was a very, very old man, probably in his 90s, and who had heard from Bukhari in 866, 64 years before that. So, really, seriously, do you think I have to accept that we have Imam Bukhari's work? Seriously? Be honest. And even, I'm not even going there, how Imam Bukhari collected hadiths almost 200 years after the death of the Prophet. That's another day's argument. But let's settle this first. Whether, if we have Imam Bukhari's work. Now you can say, there weren't many written books at that time. But I can refute that. Recently, in Egypt, in Alexandria precisely, they have come across an hadith collection of Abu Ubay. Hadith collection of Abu Ubay, and that was penned in 867, when Bukhari was alive. Abu Ubay was a famous Islamic scholar, hadith collector, but he can't be compared with Imam Bukhari. So how come Imam Bukhari, being so great, having so many people taking him to be the best hadith collector of all times, we do not have a single copy of Imam Bukhari's work? We don't have a single copy, or even from his greatest students, Sahi Muslim's writer, Muslim, Tirmizi, Nasai, Abu Dawud. We don't have a copy of any of their works. And we have to rely on Farabri, an unknown man, or little known, and Marwazi. So Marwazi even penned Imam Bukhari's work almost 150 years after Bukhari's death. You must be pulling my legs.